bring him in. Chris McChesney. It's so great to have you here, Chris. I was telling you prior to when we were recording that I have implemented the 4 disciplines of execution at multiple roles in multiple companies over the years. So it is certainly a joy for me to get the opportunity to finally speak with you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Ryan. That's so great to hear.
Yeah,
I'm delighted to be on, and I love your track record with this.
Oh, thank you. It means
Congratulations.
a lot.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Chris, because in your profession and what you've studied and what you've written about and the people you've spent time around, you have got to witness people and leaders who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time a lot. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what have you found to be some of the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence?
That's an awesome question, and it's one I think about a lot. I get to follow a lot of leaders when they launch strategy, and then they want me to lay down some execution principles. So I've got this interesting purview on some super exceptional leaders. And the ones that really started to stand out to me, in addition to having that drive, that relentless pursuit of excellence, maybe that's table stakes for this conversation. There were 2 attributes, and it didn't show up right away. The first attributes was they really expected a lot of everybody around them, but in a positive way. Like even if you were consulting, they would look at you like, you know, you're going to do great things, like exceptional things. Like they just sort of believe in you. It wasn't a punitive expectation, but it still gave you knots in your stomach, right? And then, so that was the first vibe that they seem to all have. Like they just believe that the people around them can do crazy, amazing things. And then the second vibe is they seem to, and it's going to sound corny, they seem to just radiate love. And I don't know, and it's, or warmth or something. And it seems to be those 2, expectations and love. And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, well, that probably goes for every great parent I've ever heard about as well. So that's my real shorthand answer to people that have not just achieved things themselves, but with others.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense when I started envisioning the leaders who have impacted me the most and why they've done it. And that makes a lot of sense. Are there initial 1 or 2 examples that you think of in your lifetime that come to mind of those people who they've expected a lot in a positive manner and they radiated love?
You know, the people that I was with when it clicked were the people that run that really unusual grocery store in the Northeast, Wegmans. And they're big 40X users, and it's privately owned, and they've got to be richer than mine is, right? But on Christmas Eve, they're out in a van. They could be at, Vail, Colorado, on their own mountain, right? But they're in a van delivering gifts, going store to store in the cold and, in upstate New York. And yet I've been there at some of their executive reviews, and one leader after the other is just reporting on these amazing results, and it's surreal. I keep wishing there were cameras, and they hate it when I talk about them. So they're not into blowing their own horn, but they rate from the very beginning. Those 2 vibes were so clear, and then I started seeing it in others, but they were a pretty dramatic example of it, and the results speak for themselves.
This may be selfishly, Chris, but I think people might be interested to go inside the room, and I don't know how much you're allowed to share because I published my first book recently, a few months ago, and now what's starting to happen, in addition to the podcast, is where a company will say, hey, will you be a part of our strategy sessions or our quarterly business reviews or our leadership meetings? And so that's not something I've done in the past, and maybe a book that resonates with people helps, and I would imagine 4DX or the 4 disciplines of execution helps. What is it like? What is your role when you're brought into, you don't have to speak about Wegmans if they don't want to, or somebody like that, but what's it like being an outsider brought in, and how do you view your role to add value to a meeting like that? I assume they brought you in because they're 4DX fans and they implement it, but what does that feel like? What does it look like? Take us inside there.
Yeah, so first of all, it runs the gamut. Everything from an organization where they just might want me to do a keynote and just talk about general principles, all the way to a 12-year relationship with Marriott International, where, you know, I was in with David Marriott and the senior, all the senior leaders for the western half of the United States last week, and we meet with them on a pretty regular basis. Here's one of the things. So let me give you my focal point, and then I think how they use us. And it's not just me, but there's a group at FranklinCovey, you know, Stephen Covey's organization that I've been with for 30 years. But as far as my purview on this, I keep reminding myself, my backyard, their backyard. My backyard is a finite set of execution principles that I have 18 years and 3,000 reps playing with. And that's my backyard. And I can be kind of a lion in my backyard. And then there's their backyard. And their backyard is hospitality or retail or technology or something else. And I'm a lamb in their backyard. I ask questions, but I don't pretend to be an expert. I really, and this is something when I bring consultants on, I tell them, look, you got to be really clear when you're in somebody else's wheelhouse. They've forgotten more than you are ever going to know. You don't get to have opinions about a lot of things you think you know something about. So I think as long as I've been able to do that, Ryan, they continue to you know, utilize me in the areas where they think I might know something and I might have an opinion. And then the relationships tend to come, but it's always on this point of human adoption around a strategy. That's always the area where they kind of want my input.
So they have a strategy and they bring you in to help them execute on the strategy they've created.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And it's normally it's the human rub. It's
Yes.
the level of buy-in. And normally it's not right up front. Most of these groups have already had some friction or they're not talking to us in the first place. And that's not uncommon. It's that human side of execution is brutal for just about everybody.
I believe I think I saw you in a speech talk about, and you've written about this too in the book, but Ram Charan, that's how you pronounce his last name, correct?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Ram,
fascinating character.
He wrote a book called Execution, correct?
Yep.
And one of the questions was, what do leaders struggle with more, strategy or execution? And when you ask that to a crowd, typically they'll say it, if they're honest. Most places they struggle with execution.
About 99% will, to get without looking at the person next to them, will just go execution.
Execution, right?
Yep.
Yet what they're taught in school is strategy, or we hear about putting together your strategic plan. Yet the strategy certainly is important, and obviously culture is important, but the execution of the strategy is your specialty. So can you share a little bit about that dynamic of taking somebody's strategy and then whether it's Wegmans or Marriott or somebody else, and then saying, this is how we're actually going to execute on that strategy?
Yeah, thank you. This is like any new field, I say any new field, I guess most new fields always start at the first feeling like an art, and then they move into something that feels more like a science. And I think execution is a classic example of that, because people want to talk about the strategy and what you're doing and how you're doing. And then in terms of how you get that organization to dance with you, hey, that's probably more of an art, and we have different styles, and hey, that table stakes, right? That's something you ought to be able to do, until you look around or you ask executives and they're all dying on this hill. And so when and I got to tell you, Ryan, I love that you're a quarterback, because I have this visual in my mind. Can I go out on this level?
Yes. Yeah. You can't tease it and not tell.
Okay. All right. So I got this visual. And this might have been you, I don't know. But I get this visual of this hotshot high school quarterback who's a blue chipper, and this university lands him, and they're so pumped to get him. And they had a press conference, and this kid he thinks everybody on campus loves him. And what he doesn't know is the defensive coordinator and the defensive players have heard just about enough about this kid. And he's in his first practice, and he's lining up under center, thinking about what a great moment this is and how he's going to tell his kids. And he looks at the defense and he sees something he's never seen before. And 11 players are shifting and moving and stunting, and he forgot the play. And the ball snapped, and he's on his back. And the moral of the story is execution does not like complexity.
I like the analogy. The story.
Can you see it? Right? You've been there.
So I've been there. I don't know how much you know about my story, but I
Googled you before. I was seeing pictures on the internet.
Yeah. So I vividly remember. So I went to Centerville High School and played my first 2 years in college at Miami University here, competing, by the way, side by side with Ben Roethlisberger. We went there at the same time, same position. So
no kidding.
Anyway, I do remember. I remember those first snaps though, Chris, and thinking, I have no idea what's happening here, and certainly forgetting the plays. As a quarterback too, forgetting the snap count has happened. And that's really embarrassing. So you're just hoping that you guess right. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like,
so this visual,
that
the other 99.9% of the population is never in your shoes, but we all fantasize about it, right? but then project 4 years in the future, and it's a senior, right? And he was everything he said they said he was going to be. And the defensive players might not like him any more than they liked him as a freshman, but he lines up under center, and they're doing all the same stuff. They're stunting and they're moving around. And what he's thinking is, okay, they're trying to show me man on man. They're clearly in a Tampa 2. Not that I know what a Tampa 2 is. I just know they say stuff like that. And he's thinking that flat's going to be open in about 2 seconds, and I'm just going to drop it to the halfback, and I'm going to get 15 yards. And so I like this analogy because the complexity didn't go down. That was the same level of complexity as a freshman that was present in this quarterback was a veteran senior All-American. What changed was what we call pattern recognition, or a lot of people call pattern recognition, right? He's not seeing 11 independent bodies moving around. He sees linebackers shifting. He sees a cornerback moving from one coverage to another. It's all slowed down because he was able to dissect and recognize patterns. And we do the same thing all the time without realizing it. So back to your question about execution. There's 3 components to any strategy from an execution lens. Right? Because if you just put all the elements of a strategy together, it looks like the 11 players dancing on the other side of the field. Like stunning and blitzing. And it looks like, I've got KPIs, and I've got projects, and I've got corporate initiatives, and I've got, crises of the moment. And it's just too much. And leaders really have to deal with a great deal of complexity. So what we say is, look, break it into 3 parts to start with. And this sort of preludes 4 disciplines of execution. So even before you get to 4 disciplines, the first thing we want to do for a leader is lower the blood pressure, okay? And so we say all of the elements of your strategy that can be accomplished with management authority, we nickname that stroke of the pen. It could be allocation of resources, could be a change in compensation, a restructure, a media buy, all your chess moves, put all those in one bucket. Because, and we'll get to that in a minute, those are going to require a certain treatment. Now, take all of the existing life support measurements that you use, vital signs for your operation, customer churn, new accounts, cost per transaction, all of those, and put those in another bucket we're going to call life support. And try and get just about everything in that between those 2 buckets, and then carve out a little bit of space in the middle. And we're going to call that breakthrough. And that column I want empty, and then you can pull from the other 2 columns and put something in the break. But that's something that you can't, it started as a stroke of the pen, but you can't get it done as this. You can't buy that result. Like, yeah, we bought the new customer, acquisition software or client, portal, but it's not giving us the result we need. Or there's some KPI and I can see it dropping every day. I can't change that. And whenever you're stalling on either side, 9 out of 10 times, it's because there's a human barricade. And it goes in the middle, and the middle requires a different treatment. And that's where we use 4 disciplines of execution. That was a super long answer, but that's the very first thing, the very first lens we want executives to look at with any strategy is to break it into those 3 components: stroke of the pen, life support, and breakthroughs, and just lower the noise. And then we start talking about the different treatments, and we do a great deal in the breakthrough category.
So let's think of a specific person here, Chris, that we can relate this to, so that we can zoom in a bit. So I'm thinking of somebody who works at a big successful company. They are in between an individual contributor and the CEO. So we can define that as a mid-level manager. The title doesn't really matter, but they're a leader of a team, but they're not the ultimate leader within the company as the CEO. Okay. So that person, in my case, when I've used 4 disciplines, I was a sales leader with a team. And so putting in metrics and understanding the why.
That was my experience utilizing this as well. As I ran a consulting / sales organization. Yeah. So I have that same purview. Keep going.
So for those 3 parts of stroking the pen and life support and the breakthrough column, what would be an example, maybe a story or something?
Let's go into that person. So can we stay in sales for a minute?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. That's where, I mean, not everybody's in sales, but I understand that. But that's where I was at 3.
It's one of the easier ones for most people to imagine. Okay. So in terms of stroke of the pen as a sales manager, right? I've got a little bit of authority in my region. There's a mix of products, and we are going to modify the portfolio this year. Okay. Marketing is giving us some choices as well. They've got a variety of campaigns. We're going to go to more of a live event sort of showcase campaign. I like that. I got a limited budget. I got to pick just a few of these. Also, corporate's giving me an opportunity to run some incentives with my sales managers or with my reps, my area reps. And I'm going to double down on that as well. It's going to cost me a little bit in my sales budget, but I'm going to do it. Okay. I've also got a hiring decision I've got to make. And I'm thinking about combining 2 territories, but I'm nervous. Right. And so I've got, these are decisions, because what we start to learn is some leaders are really good in one of these columns and they might struggle in another. Right. So I might be talking to somebody like this is not my, these type of bets make me nervous. I'm checking with other people, or I'm a bull. I'm like really aggressive over here. Who knows, right? But I organize things that way. Then I go over to life support, right? And I know I've got a couple that I'm looking at. I got a close ratio metric, but I'm suspicious about it because I don't like my denominator. I'm not sure all the things we're calling leads are really, any of this sounded familiar, Ryan, are really leads, right? And then I got qualified prospects, and I've got how much of the business is coming from existing clients versus new clients, and cost of new client, acquisition of new client cost, and if all that stuff starts to overlap. Okay, now on top of all of this, let me tell you what's really going on, if I can make it up, is that we're sort of pivoting as an organization, and a bunch of competitors have entered the space that we've always owned, and they're offering some cheap solutions that aren't as good, but they're taking market share right now. And the only way we can hold ground is we've got to start acting more like a trusted business advisor. But my salespeople can't seem to make the shift. They keep going to product benefits, and there's these great issues they won't even talk to their customers about. And we've got great products lining up for them. And I can't stroke of the pen that one. I can't buy it. Crap, I would. I'd spend, if I could get my salespeople to move off a solution and play trusted, I'd spend any amount of money I had, right? And so that's showing up in the middle. And I don't even know how to define it. I have to think. I know what it is, but I have to think about it. And what I say is, I want 15% of revenue to come from an account where we're offering advisory services. If we're doing that, we've kept our first foot out of the grave. All right. So now I got life support, I got chess moves, but I got to keep those out of the frame. So, because I know that getting that advisory services business is the game changer. And at the end of the day, if I don't do that, it's my first foot in the grave. That's my strategic play. So just, I hope that was helpful, and I hope people could follow. I'm making it up as I go along, but I know salespeople, I mean, I'm watching your face, you're wincing. You're having post-traumatic stress.
We've been there. Well, we're still all in sales every day. I mean,
right? Everybody should relate.
We're all in sales. I mean, even if you don't have a quota, you're still in sales. You're selling yourself, selling ideas, trying to build coalitions, get ideas moving. So Chris, there's two parts of how I want to move forward, man. I appreciate you doing that and zooming in. I want to introduce the four disciplines, and we're going to go into each one of them. But before that, I'm just curious about you. And so I'm curious, how did you, because there are going to be people listening who have not read your book or heard of you yet. Yeah. They're going to say, who's this guy? And why is
even the people reading the book are saying, who's this guy?
Well, they're saying, like, why how did he become the execution guy? Why is he the person, along with Ram Charan, who has a famous name in some parts of the world? Why Chris? So where does this come from, that whether it's from your upbringing or your background or your history? I'm curious to learn more about you.
That's really nice, Ryan. I'll tell you this. A lot of people know Sean Covey. He's one of the authors. Sean had a lot to do with the original construct of the model with another gentleman named Jim Stewart, who passed away. We all dedicated the book to Jim. The Jim Hewling, the third author listed on the book, and myself are very close. He's kind of my mentor. Jim is the embodiment of these principles. Like, you just talk to Jim, and he exudes what I'm trying to say. Yeah, just clarity and discipline and clear thinking. And I'm the electron. I'm the hyperactive kid that's buzzing around him. The Dallas Morning News did an article on me, and I unwittingly told them that I had to take Ritalin as a kid. And so the headline read, "Ritalin Kid helps organizations focus." And I got a great response on that article. But that article got me thinking that, sometimes in life, our challenges really are hidden opportunities. I had so much frustration, Ryan, with this issue that I think I was drawn to the topic. And it was a natural point of passion, not because I was good at these disciplines, but because I needed them. So 30 years ago, this month, wow. 30 years ago this month, I stowed away in Stephen Covey's organization as an unpaid intern who didn't need an internship. And there's literally an episode of Seinfeld where Kramer starts going to work for a company that never hired him. And this was several years before Kramer did it, I did it. I got called and chewed out in HR 4 months after I had stowed away in this organization. And they were afraid they were going to get sued. They kept saying, "Kid, you can't do this."
What do you mean? You just kept showing up?
I just kept showing up. I told somebody I needed an internship, and they said, okay.
What made you go there? Why'd you go there?
They wouldn't interview me.
So you just said, I'm going to keep showing up?
I was a Stephen Covey groupie. I love Seven Habits.
So you love Covey.
I love the same reason you're doing this podcast. I love this field. But you couldn't buy an interview with these people.
Yeah.
And so 4 months later, during the 4 months, by the way, they had fired their publicist. I had taken over as Stephen Covey's publicist, calling all the contacts in New York.
Really?
Yeah. It was this weird alignment.
How did you have the guts to keep showing? How old were you, by the way, at this time?
23.
23. How did you have kind of the guts and wherewithal and the I guess the not caring about making money mindset? Like, how did all this
I had another job.
Okay.
My wife and I had only been married a few months. She was working, I was working, and then this was my hobby. And I was going to school, and this was my hobby. And so I would show up And I knew this, I knew that I had a little bit of time to make a mark before they busted me. And the way I even got in the door was eluding that I worked for a newspaper that I didn't work for. I said, I'm writing an article on fast growing companies in the area for the Daily Herald. And I did. I wrote an article and I sent it to the Daily Herald, but it sounded like I worked for the Daily Herald. And they did publish it. So I was really out on a limb here. But they were like, I think there were some people that were so amused by it. They were like, all right, give him $6 an hour. Let's see what he can do. And that's literally what they did. They gave me $6 an hour. They didn't have the heart to fire me. I'd killed myself for 4 months. And I got to watch how Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits book was just peaking. Like it hit #1 in the New York Times the week after they had fired their publicist. So that's why. And I was just in that office and they were like, well, he's from New York. Let him call Good Morning America. That happened. Mm. And they'd gotten a real publicist on board after a while. But that opportunity was just a gift. And then it was a growing company and I just got to move into different positions. And so for 30 years, I got to be mentored by wonderful experts and thought leaders that were attracted to Stephen Covey's work. And in 2003, myself and a number of people started on this, fell in love with the problem of execution and have been on it for, closing in on 20 years, 18 years right now.
For the person listening who may be earlier in their career, who they admire someone or some idea or some company, what advice do you give to them based on your life experiences? I've
got daughters, son-in-laws, and sons.
You have 7 children, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We did with kids what we tell people not to do with goals. We were always just one more.
5 daughters, 2 sons, correct?
The last one was cute. What do you say? One more? So
what a great mindset.
I'm thinking about this. I don't know if there's a book in this or not.
Okay.
But Stephen Covey said something, and my hero, and it has resonated with me my whole life when it comes to careers. He said, work outside your job description, but within your circle of influence. Right? So there's your job, and this really fits 4 Disciplines doctrine, because the 4 Disciplines doctrine is always about hold on to the day job and then give a special treatment to that 20%. So if you don't think your job presents an opportunity, I'll make you a promise right now. Your manager, your leader, and if not him, his or her leader, right? He or she has some problems they can't get to. And you can help them. They would love to clone themselves. And you start, now I went so far as to work for a company that didn't hire me. So you could go out on a limb a little bit and start working on a problem that your leaders have and they don't have bandwidth to go after it. You start collecting research. You become a geek, right? Make a podcast on that topic. Invite speakers, they'll show up. Like lose yourself in, there's another great expression I'll put over the top of this. Don't fall in love with a solution, fall in love with a problem. Matter of fact, I just said it a second ago, right? And if you, maybe it's not within your job description, but you'd be surprised what's within your circle of influence. And when they see that you've got your head not just into my career and my benefits and how come nobody's shown me a career path around here, I hate that person. I'm sorry. I have an allergic reaction to that.
It's one of the biggest complaints in all of the EOS surveys, the employee opinion surveys that come out is I've been in those leadership positions and seen it happen. You've seen it obviously, Chris, where one of the #1 complaints at literally every company, every single one of them is, I don't know if I see a career path.
I know. And someone's supposed to give that to you. This is not college. They're not going to lay out your prerequisites for you.
Yeah. What do you say to that person that's saying that? They're thinking like, well, no, you don't understand, Chris. That's how it is at my company. Like someone else got picked or I didn't do it. What do you say to that person?
I love this. You're right there, Ryan. Mm-hmm. Someone else is always going to get picked.
Mm-hmm.
I've never said this publicly, and I'm about to confess something.
Let's pause. Okay.
I believe I've been in 12 like professional interview scenarios.
Okay.
I was hired 0 times.
Really?
I think I've had 9 or 10 different jobs in my life. None of them from an interview process. I think I'm 0 for 12 in interviews. I think they think, yeah, he was kind of funny, but there's no way we're trusting him. It's crazy.
Wow.
They won't, I don't know. I'm self-conscious about it a little bit. So it's weird that I'm saying this, but my point is this, like, I can't buy my way through an interview. It's funny, I can sell stuff, but apparently not myself. But I've had wonderful opportunities from not consciously doing what I'm advocating, but maybe subconsciously just getting seduced by a challenge, by a problem. And oh, here's my big one, Ryan. Wow, I almost get angry talking about this. Be ready to put a lot of work into stuff no one's paying you for. Ryan, how long do you have to work on this podcast before you made a dime?
A few years.
A few years.
Yeah.
This
well, not only not making a dime, but lost money.
Lost money.
Lost money. Yeah.
Folks, please, if you don't have the capacity to work without reward, then you have to be very, very lucky and very, very fortunate, and most of us are not.
How have you gotten these jobs? You've gotten a lot of jobs, or you've gotten promoted, or you've done work. What since
I couldn't see him coming.
What do you mean?
In other words, there was no Machiavellian strategy behind any of this.
Yeah.
You just chase the problem.
Yep.
Get really good at the problem, and then one day there's an opportunity, and someone's talking to someone else, and someone's trying to do something, and they need a person, and you talk to somebody, or you invent a job. Or, I mean, when we built the practice, the execution practice, sometimes you'll hear the term intrapreneur.
Right.
My partner and I literally birthed a company inside a company with no fun. I mean, like one call to the CEO that said, please don't stop us. And he was all on board and got very excited about it. But we literally grew this thing inside of a small P&L. Mark Josie was basically funding me to take on this project. And we dragged Jim Stewart from across the country, and we just skunkworks this thing. And 4 years later, we get a phone call, and they said, hey, we want you to do this across the whole world. You guys are producing results. This is fantastic. I didn't see that coming. At no point was that the end game. Just great. Fall in love with the problem, folks. Trust yourself, and great things will happen. And what you'll find is there aren't very many people doing what you're doing if you'll be willing to do that.
I remember talking to Carly Fiorina, and she said she went from being a kind of a receptionist to the first woman CEO of a Fortune 50 company, and I said, what do you think it was? And she said, run towards the fire. Everyone else is running away. Obviously, that's a metaphor, but she said, run towards the fire. You're giving me
goosebumps. Here,
by the way, we're doing this on video. I'll put this one on. I'll put this on YouTube so people can watch it too. But run towards the fire. So that when everyone else is running away from those problems, or they say, let somebody else handle that, who do you think remembers you're gonna be the one remembered if you're raising your hand for not the easy cake project that may get a big spotlight, but for the one who solves the tough problem? And so that's why I love your mindset. The
jobs I never got opened up to an interview process.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a really great point. I love this talk, Chris, because I think it can apply to anybody, any leader, any person looking, that just the mindset of how you approach your work. And I've said this a lot. I know. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, think about where the young professional is coming from. They're coming from an environment that the ideas we're talking about now are so foreign. they won't occur to people. Like everything in the academic universe, thankfully, is laid out in a progression with prerequisites. And if you work hard and there's a high degree of fairness, and fairness is just, boy, don't you dare test me on something that wasn't in the pre-review materials. And we're brainwashed into thinking there's no ambiguity and there's a lot of fairness. And then you get put into a world where fair has no value.
Right.
You can cry all day long that something's not fair and no one cares.
True.
That's not a commodity. And ambiguity is everywhere. Nobody's got an answer for anything. And you have to switch from one environment to another. And I think it's okay if your expectations are calibrated. If you're patient with yourself and you recognize, okay, we just went, from running on land to swimming in the ocean. It's a different game.
I was saying, I love it. I was saying, Chris, my wife mentors a lot of people, and Miranda is one of the smartest people I know, very lucky. And that's one of the first pieces, especially with people who are younger, earlier in their career. It's just be proactive. Be proactive. Go look to try and solve problems and make other people's lives easier that you work with. And if you just create a habit of that, create a mindset shift towards doing that on a regular basis, you'll be amazed. The job you will create for yourself wherever you are will evolve, and you could actually create a better job for yourself wherever you are. And others will be so attracted to want to work with a person like that. If your mindset is always about being proactive and not just, well, nobody told me to do that, or they didn't say that, or they didn't say I had to do that. Well, that person, that's the average, or even the good, the great, or the excellent. They don't think that way.
Can I tell you one more?
Yeah.
I'm kind of afraid that I'm painting myself as a poster child for this. And the truth is, 3 years ago, I found myself in a situation where I was very blessed, but I was playing the victim. And I was caught in that victim mindset that a lot of leaders get caught in, where they don't feel they've been given enough budget, and we've built this thing, and the organization doesn't really appreciate what I'm doing, and they're not helping. And boy, if we just had what we needed, what I could do, and I could paint this story for you that the hero struggle. And the new president of our company, a gentleman named Paul Walker, we're getting personal here, right? He had the best. Oh wow, this is really personal. He had the best mentor.
Are you going to get yourself in trouble?
Oh, I hope not.
Okay, go ahead.
But I'm going there.
Okay, go for it.
Paul said to me one day, we're on a call. This is the president of our company, not the CEO. And he said, "Can I give you some hard feedback?" And I said, "Yeah," because I'd gotten really victim-y on him. And he said, "When you come to headquarters, folks, they like you personally, but they're not crazy to work with you, Chris. You always show up already having figured out the solution. You're not listening. You're selling the whole time. You're always laughing and everything's fun, but you're not fun to work with." And I said, okay, wow, thank you. And that was a hard, that hurt. And it was, he's saying it, it's true. I'm like, I can see myself from above, and I'm just thinking, oh, I'm such a jerk. They gave me this position. I thought I was supposed to solve the problem.
Did you really know it was true? Did you have the awareness?
Totally.
You knew it was true, but you still needed to hear it from somebody else?
It was a paradigm shift, because I thought my job was to have the next answer.
Okay.
Instead of recognizing, hey, you know what, there's other bright people in this company. And then along with that, I started to realize, you know what, they're just people. And as a matter of fact, these are people that like me. And if I recognize they've got assets, they've got resources, they don't want to make bad bets with their money, they want to make good bets. If I understand their needs and I start moving my organization in directions that meet their needs, they'll fund me all I need. I'm the problem. I got that mindset, that victim mentality. I'm it. And just like magic, all of a sudden, things just started working their way out. And I found myself in a great situation. I've got more support than I've ever had. I'm doing the stuff that I like doing. My original partner is back on my team again, doing all the stuff I'm not good at. And I honestly think that if I that one thing, I just needed to say, Chris, this is you. You're doing this. And it flipped. With all my heart, I believe that, Ryan.
Wow. I think it illustrates the value of having intelligent leaders who are willing and have the guts to give you critical feedback. There is not a person.
He's one of the best. Paul's one of the best leaders. He's 8 years younger than I am.
Yeah.
And he is just really clear and cared enough about me. I mean, I got a reputation for having a temper. It was risky for him to do that.
Wow. And being 8 years younger, I didn't realize that part of it too, which can be hard. And I get that question a lot, actually. Hey, I got promoted. This is an email. I got promoted, and more than half the people on my team are older than me. How in the world am I going to do this? What do you say to that person? You had done to you.
As soon as you said that, I think about Paul Walker. And let me tell you what this guy's MO is. It's never about Paul. I heard Simon Sinek talking about this, and boy, it cut me right to the center. Because I can get here, but it's not my default position. Paul is always interested in understanding what's really going on. People like Paul, but he never seems too worried about whether you like him. He will say things that are really, like I just mentioned, he will say hard things, but he doesn't say them in a hard way. And he's about the solution. And when you see leaders who forget themselves, stop worrying what they think of you. They're not thinking about you. They're not thinking about you unless you're thinking about you. And if you just stop thinking about you and think about the problem, run to the fire, and think about how you clear the path for other people to run to the fire. Liking you is a very natural byproduct that comes at the end after they yell at you a lot.
That's a good point. You know, an old story, my dad, I was getting ready to go to some speech or it doesn't matter, a conference. And I said, hey, what do you think of these pants? Do these look good? And he said, they don't care about your pants. They care about their pants. And I said, that's right. I'm not going to worry about this. You know, let me just wear some plain black pants. You know,
I love that you remember that.
Yeah. I'll never forget it.
That was a lifetime of wisdom.
Yeah. They don't care about your pants. They care about their pants.
Their pants.
Like, oh, yeah, good point. That's a good point. And I just said, I'm just going to put the black ones on. No big deal. And
Simon Sinek, when I listened to him last week, and I've not followed him, but
I've had him on a few times.
Have you really? Okay.
He's really good.
He might have mentioned this, but he said he can tell within the first few minutes whether a speaker, whether a consultant is focused on contribution or self-consciousness. I don't know those were the exact words that he used.
No, I know what you mean.
But he
am I serving this audience? Am I serving here versus am I thinking about myself? Like, how can I be a servant to the people that I'm supposed to be serving? I think that's what it's all about. And I remember I asked him why lead. Leading's a lot harder than following or just being just wandering. And he said, if you care to see others succeed, that's why you lead. And so it even rhymed. It really stuck with me. I remember.
Okay,
right?
I got one for you.
Go ahead.
Patrick Lencioni. Have you ever had Patrick on?
A few times. He's incredible.
Yeah. That dude is a hero of mine. He's so good on stage. I don't even want to be that good. Have you seen him in a big? I
have. He's incredible.
Isn't it crazy?
He's great.
You think you're in his living room. Like, I don't even know what that is, but I got to tell you this.
He makes it look too easy, though, and I've told him that. I said, you just make it look too easy.
Amen.
And it never is. And that's when you know somebody's really good at their job, when they make it look so like, oh, I could do that. That would be simple. No, it's not. He just makes it look so easy because he's really good. Anyway, go ahead.
So he's at Global Leadership Summit last year. I got to speak there once, and I've been back every time as a participant. Right? I don't go with anybody. I just go by myself. Like 300,000 leaders like from all over the world dial into this thing.
I watched your video prior. It's actually on my other computer screen.
Oh,
I watched
nice.
it, and I you had to be nervous real quick. We're going to get back to Lencioni.
Oh, terrified. Lencioni was the speaker
I'm talking about
that
you.
year.
Oh, okay.
In
When you were going on.
2016, he ended day 1. I started day 2. I only had 35 minutes and I could not get my presentation into 35 minutes. It was like playing Jenga. Every time I took a piece out, it collapsed. I wasn't nervous. It was the most terrified I had ever been in my career. I was being given a chance of a lifetime and I was blowing it.
You can't tell.
It came together.
I know. I was just saying, I couldn't tell.
It came together at about 10 o'clock the night before. I could see how to do it.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh. And then that place, there's just amazing energy in that room. It was great. But so I gotta tell you this. So Lencioni this year, I saw him in 16 and then he was back again in 2019. And it's a leadership conference. And he gets up and he says, I know that we always talk about how everyone can be a leader. And he says, everyone shouldn't be a leader. He says, and I know everyone can have influence. And he said, everyone shouldn't have influence. And he says, I don't like the term servant leadership. And he says, because it makes it sound like there's another acceptable form. And then he starts listing all of the things that good leaders have to do. And you don't want that job. If it's really not about contribution, you really don't want that job. And it wasn't entirely new, but I had never thought of it that way. It was really well done.
Taking the complex and making it simple is one of the greatest acts of intelligence that exist. And it's so hard. It's so hard, yet that's when you know someone really has a grasp on the material and they're thoughtful and intelligent as they take the complex and make it simple. Because there are many people who take the simple and make it complex to sound smarter. But Pat's one of those guys that I think takes the simple or takes the complex and makes it very simple. Chris, we're getting so off track, but I do want to spend at least a brief portion.
I know, I kept thinking that too.
My fault. But I love this though.
You're a great interviewer. This is literally fun for me. I'm being a little selfish. Sorry.
No, it's fun for me too. So we're gonna touch on the 4 disciplines of execution. I think if this is something you want to implement, we could do a round 2 where we go deep dive, or we could even set up. We could set up within the Learning Leader Academy, like set up a separate call or something like that. We can figure something out. But I'm gonna introduce each one, and then I'll have you dive into each one about just kind of a snippet of what
color
it means.
Commentary.
Yeah. So I'll do all 4 first, and then I'll circle back to 1 so that you can dive in. And I have a follow-up question on maybe a couple of them based on some friends of mine who I told them I was talking to that they're implementing your stuff right now.
That's great. Good for you.
Yeah, they're implementing it right now, and so they have like, I'd love to talk to Chris. So, okay, anyway, here they are. It's the book's called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. It's really just a process. So, number 1, focusing on the wildly important goals. Number 2, act on lead measures. Number 3, keep a compelling scorecard. Number 4, create a cadence of accountability. I'm actually looking right now, Chris, at one of these I put together for a sales team I led many years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then one of my reps that he put together from that team, and it's really incredible. But anyway, let's start at number 1. Focus on the wildly important goals. Why is this number 1, and what does this mean?
Yeah. That exercise we were doing before with the 3 columns is a way to do that in a complex environment. I got tons of stroke of the pen. I got a lot of day job. That's going to eat up 80%. The most valuable currency that I have is the energy I can steal from the day job. And what am I going to spend that currency on? That is how you focus on the wildly important. And think of focus in 2 ways, right? Narrowing the focus, right? Everything else on the outside, narrowing the focus. But then think about the way a camera focuses. Think about that clarity. And so we give a very simple formula for these, and it's X to Y by when. from X to Y by when, or said differently, starting line, finish line, deadline. And our favorite example is in 1961 when NASA changed from the concept, very hard to execute on a concept, and they weren't doing a good job, the concept of lead the world in space exploration, which sounds like a target, but it's not until you hear a target. To John F. Kennedy's, we're going to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade and return him safely home. And when you go from concept to target, by the way, discipline one is the one that we find most people wanting to sort of skip. They think they've got it, and it causes the most problems when it's not done properly. It's the most misunderstood, in my opinion, of all the disciplines. And it really, that target has to be taken down to each team. You want to break that target down as small as you can. We're working on the second edition of 4 Disciplines. We're putting a lot more muscle behind that idea in round 2.
Perfect. Love the Kennedy example because he gets it done in one line. Okay, 2 is act on lead measures. The golden rule of execution is identifying the lead measures. So these are some of the day-to-day actions. Share briefly why these are so important and maybe an example.
Yeah, we were describing this to a group of leaders, and somebody, they couldn't help themselves. They just said out loud, "Oh, you're just talking about leverage." And literally in that moment, I was like, okay, we can write the book now. We didn't know what the second principle was. Lead measures have 2 characteristics, and I'll use a simple example, but let me tell you the characteristics first. They are predictive of the lag measure. Now, the lag measure is, in this case, is synonymous with the wildly important goal. Because we framed the wildly important goal as X to Y by when, taking those targets down to the team level, at the team level, the lead measure is predictive. If it moves, the goal moves, and equally important and often overlooked, influenceable by the team. Go back to your sales example. It doesn't matter that proposals drive new accounts. Proposals are not a good lead measure if my team can't get them. Yeah, I get proposals get me new accounts. I only got 2 out of 20 salespeople that can actually go out and get proposals because they're focused. It's got to be something I can influence. Now, what they can do is they can get referral leads from existing clients. That one they can get their hands on. So the classic example is diet and exercise or lead measures for weight, which is lag. We don't do weight loss, we do diet and exercise. But in business and in life, we we totally drift towards lag data, even though we cannot influence it like the lever.
Number 3, keep a compelling scorecard.
A lead and a lag measure represents a bet. I'm going to run X number of miles a week in order to lose, 1 pound a week, something like that. It's a bet. To leaders, that feels real. To people that actually work for a living, that's just an interesting conversation. Until it goes live. Once the starting gun goes off, and scoreboards sort of represent, it just went live. It's on. I love the notion game on. Mm-hmm. That I don't even know what the game is. I hear somebody say game on. Like there's an entirely different gear in the human brain. And it's not until you get to discipline 3 that people go game on. And okay, how are we doing on the lead? How are we doing on the lag? It was just a conversation before this. And it doesn't look like the data that we're used to seeing. It doesn't look like spreadsheets. It actually looks like the scoreboards you see in sporting events. Down and distance, lead, score, lag. Shots on goal, lead, score, lag, right? It hits. lead, runs, lag. You can see they give you both. The networks show you that in the corner of your screen because they want to grab your attention.
In a sales environment, what does this look like? Let's just create.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do one. Okay. Can we hold this for just a second?
Yes.
Okay. So let's do it wrong first and then right, if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll go back to kind of what I was hinting at before. I want new accounts. Too much of our business is coming from existing accounts. We're getting lazy. We got to get some new accounts. And we know that first appointments drive new accounts. And we know that our top 2 producers are great at getting to first appointments. And so you'll hear this expression, hey, if you want to do what the best, you want to get what the best get, do what the best do. Not so fast. This is a bit of a trap sometimes. You got people looking at those 2 best performers going, I don't know how she does it. I've followed her around. I've gone on passes with her. They come to her. I can't bottle that. And so if 80% or 90% of your sales force feels that first appointments are, yeah, they're predictive. I can't argue with that, but I can't influence them. That is not a winnable game. That's what we're after with this whole thing, a high stakes winnable game. And if I can't see it, and so maybe we say, okay, I need something more controllable. Hey, I'll tell you what, folks, let's try the lead measure of cold calling. All right. So that's like a really long lever. And we're out there cold calling every day. Well, guess what? That's very influenceable. That's controllable. And we're moving the lever. And the pole's bending. The rock's not moving. I don't know which level of hell cold calling is, but it's one of them.
I've done it for years.
Done it as hard. Now, yeah, there are scenarios where cold calling will move the rock, but there's a lot more where it won't.
Yep.
And so we just tried 2 examples. I tried one where it was predictive but not influenceable. That didn't work. I tried another one where it was influenceable but it wasn't predictive.
Yep.
Welcome to sales.
Yes.
Right? You might not have been using those words, but you never stop talking about it.
Correct.
That's about the time we get a phone call and people go, this lead measure stuff is hard. All right, so time out. When that happens, it doesn't always happen, but if you find that you're striking out on your leads, it's usually because your lag is too big. You've got too big of a wig and you got to break it down. So new accounts is just a little bit too big of a rock for this particular team. Not for another team, but for this team it is, right? So rather than beat up the team, let's make it a winnable game. Now, what was that other thing? First appointments. Not as hard as new accounts, but not something they can control. What if we made first appointments the wig? Go one more. Go give me a rock about half that size, and now give me another lever. Now I got different levers for that one. Okay, we're gonna do promotional events, number of participants in event. We're gonna do referral leads. We're gonna do like all of a sudden opportunity. Now all of a sudden they'll move, and then here's the key: let them pick. Give them a bunch of options. And even if you hate their answer, let them run their play here. Not on how you spend your money, not on your core work processes, not on your products. They don't get to vote on any of that stuff. But on a breakthrough strategy, give the team all your best thinking and then let them pick. It's really important that they believe it's a winnable game.
Okay.
Does this work? Because I'm right at the heart of the beast right now.
Yeah, I know.
And we didn't know to talk about this when we wrote the first book, but we've seen people struggle since.
Yeah. I mean, if it were easy, then everybody would do it and they wouldn't need the book. They wouldn't need to talk to you. Okay. 4 is create a cadence of accountability. You mentioned some of the feedback you got, and that's somebody holding you accountable, I think. So how does this go into execution?
All right, so if discipline 2 is force against leverage, right? Discipline 3 is the whole putting it all in action. Discipline 4, and everybody's probably heard this adage before, is force against leverage. Right? That lever's not doing you any good until you pull on it. So what force against leverage does is it refocuses you every single week, right? The distractions are the enemy. The day job wants to undo anything you say is a focus point. All you got to do is say, I'm going to focus on this. And in the next 48 hours, 6 things will try and knock you off that focus. So discipline 4 is this cadence of refocusing through commitments. And this throws people at first. This one's not as intuitive. It's diet and exercise. And what people tend to get hung up on is they think, okay, well, diet and exercise are the lead measures, and weight loss is the lag. It's the simplest exercise people of this process people can think of. I don't get what the commitment is. I diet and I exercise. That's what I do. No, not so fast. It's rained all week, and it's going to rain all week next week. I'm going to get that membership to the clubhouse, and I'm going to run indoors. That's a commitment I'm going to make. I need an accountability partner on my diet. I'm gonna buy that Nutra something diet plan. I'm gonna do something, one or two things every week to hedge the bet that I'll do the lead measures. And you just continue to put force against leverage, and it's extraordinary how that strengthens the bet and brings everybody back to the scoreboard. And it's 5 yards in a cloud of dust. But here's the key. Here's the piece it took us a long time to see with Discipline 4. That commitment happens in a little meeting. And we like to get these as small as possible, small team meetings where you got a scoreboard. All of us are trying to do something. We might individually have our own scoreboards, or we might all be on one scoreboard. But this seems to be the key piece in Discipline 4. It has to feel like a high stakes game. It can't feel like, oh, guys, I know everyone's so busy. I hate to pull you offline for this, but we all agreed. No. Like the good ones, we saw this, we didn't figure it out. The good ones are like, if you miss a commitment, next week, would you call me if you can't get that done? High stakes game.
Very important part. I'm glad you mentioned that. I got a question from one of my friends, Charlie McMahon, who's actually been on this podcast, and he's implemented. He leads a church. And
we get a fair amount of play there.
Yeah,
that's actually volunteers, leading volunteer organizations seem to go to this methodology.
So one of his question to me when I told him we were going to be talking was about optimization. And I thought this is a good question, and I wanted to ask it for him because I think it not only would help him, but help everybody. What are some of the obstacles to reaching optimization? Meaning, is there a story or an example you can think of about playing with lead and lag measures to finally get to optimization? You can think of where this question came from. Someone who's been very successful to build something that was basically less than 50 people to now more than 5,000 on a weekend over the past 20 years, it's an incredible story. But I'm curious for that specific part. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this is actually, we characterize wildly important goals into two categories. We call, this is not in the book, this version, we call perform and transform. Perform are those where we're working on something, but we're trying to optimize it. Transform is where we've got to pivot and we've got to go after something new. Okay, so in that perform area, optimization seems to be very tightly wed to consistency. All right, and it's much more a byproduct of consistency than greatness. We know what works. Do we follow it? Do we do it? And what lead measures allow you to do is to lock down elements of a process. Now, there might be 14 steps in the way that they welcome new people to church, but they don't get to track 14. They get to track 2. And so what you're doing is you're anchoring the process at 2 points. There's a handoff where, the greeters really work with the age appropriate ministers. I'm making this up, right? And how we make that handoff, we're going to measure that. And we're going to measure something else. And then if I can, this is a little rule that we made up and it seems to work. If we can meet a particular lead measure, achieve it for 14 weeks in a row, without a slip up. You slip up, you start over. At 14 weeks, we're calling it a habit. And we're saying, you're getting that one for free. You don't need to put a spotlight on that. You don't need to measure it. Go chase something else with that 20% of the energy you can steal. And so optimizers, if they think and process, and they start anchoring and locking the most important parts of the process. In manufacturing, they understand this. There was the manufacturers that showed us how to use lead measures on process metrics in order to drive outcomes.
Fascinating, man. We could go on
Did that
forever.
make sense?
It did. Yeah. I mean, I really, Chris, appreciate your investment of time here today. And I think we're certainly going to have,
I'm a sucker for this.
At least around two. I know. So I want to be mindful of that and respectful. So I really appreciate it, man. This has been,
let's do it again.
Been fantastic. Absolutely. Where would you send my listeners to learn more about you online?
Oh, that's great. Okay. So the FranklinCovey website has all of the goodies. Or you can go to Chris McChesney at 4dx.com. If somebody wants to get in touch with me directly, or is interested in working directly with me, or with FranklinCovey, either one. Or hit me on LinkedIn. If you've got a question, I like talking to people on LinkedIn. I'll do that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you once again for being here.
You're an awesome host, yeah. Ryan. You really got me forgetting that I was on a talk show or a podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I certainly want to continue our dialogue as we both progress, because we're always learning, growing, iterating, getting better. And I know your wisdom is much needed for all of us to hear. So thank you so much for being here, man.
Love what you're doing, Ryan. Thank you so much, brother.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, let me. I don't want to mess it up. Okay, thank you, man.
That's the first time. That's the first time that I can remember doing one of these where I forgot that we were doing 4 disciplines. Like I totally
well, we did do it for a bit.
Up, I'm like, oh crap, we haven't done that yet. Like you got me so into the topics. That was, I don't know what your magic is, but I can see why you've been doing this for 5 years. That was really fun, Ryan. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you being willing to go off, because I have a bunch of notes and it's almost all on 4 disciplines. But I also, after seeing your videos and watching you, I thought this guy, there's more to him than just, because when you read a book, you see written words, you don't get to necessarily feel the personality. And I know it wasn't just you. It was team, so you don't fully feel it. But then I was watching and said, no, there's a lot more to Chris that I want to get into.
Man.
And I'm really glad we got there, because some of that life/career advice, that's good for all of us, man. Like we all need that. And that was really good stuff, really useful, and not just fluffy, like feel good, but no, like you're going to have to put in some work. You got to go towards the hard things. And that's not always fun to hear. And it's definitely not always fun to do, but we need to hear it. So I appreciate you saying that.
Thanks, Ryan. I think you and I share a love of character and leadership.
Yeah.
And it's I can tell you've been bounced these ideas around a long time. Would you do me a favor? Would you send me the link for this?
Of course.
Because Nick, who manages me, he'll get people, and then they always want to say, hey, send us a good podcast. And I'd love to use this one, just because it's not the standard 4DX podcast.
Perfect. I'll make sure once we get it all, I add an intro and an outro and all that with my editor. We'll put that together, and then I'll shoot it off to you as soon as it's ready to roll.
Anytime on any topic, it would be my pleasure. Thank you, Ryan.
I promise I'll be following up with you, because there will be more talks to be had. There's a lot there. So I
love it. Okay. You own that. All right. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
brother.
Okay.
Take care.